Hello, welcome to Season 9 of The Horrific Podcast. We're two friends who live in different places but share a love for scary movies. The theme of this season is 100 Years of Horror. We're going to watch two horror movies from every decade, from 1920 to 2020, in chronological order. We want to see where horror came from, how it's changed, and maybe even make some predictions about where it's going. If you want to see the full list of movies we'll be reviewing this season and follow along, then check out our website at thehorrific.com. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the episode. So I know we talked before when we were watching Nosferatu the Vampire. Yeah. Like, we both thought, why was this made? Like, who was really asking for another Dracula remake? And, like, what was Werner trying to accomplish? And going into this one, I have to say I had the same attitude. And I was just like, okay, now we got Francis Ford doing this one. It's like a big deal. And then we had Werner previously doing this thing. It's a big deal. And you think these like established, revered filmmakers, and they're just like doing another adaptation of Dracula. Like, why would that be? And then I looked at the Wikipedia page and got the box office totals, and I was like, oh, okay, I get it. Like, I don't like it, but I get it.
Yeah. Well, I think we've kind of talked about that too, where, like, why do we have those remakes? And then we realize, well, it's a moneymaker, you know?
Yeah. Printing cash, not even having to think very hard about a story.
Right, yeah. And if you got a name like Francis Ford Coppola behind you, you can do anything you want. Exactly.
But I do think this one, like, it actually had some passion and emotion and danger and conflict. Like, to me, it felt like he was trying to make a really good early 90s movie. And just, it was almost like the Dracula story was just like the thing, the vehicle to carry that.
Yeah, I agree.
So, it was definitely Hollywood horror, but it was also way easier to watch than like dry German documentary horror or whatever that other one was.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But anyway, I will introduce it, and then you can do your fun facts, and then we will get into the, once again, blood-sucking details.
Hey, sounds good.
In 1992, Columbia Films brought us Bram Stoker's Dracula. This 90s take on the classic novel stars Gary Oldman, Winona Ryder, and Keanu Reeves, and Anthony Hopkins, and was directed by Francis Ford Coppola. The film tells the familiar story of Harker, Renfield, Nina, and Count Dracula, but with a few modern embellishments to give it that early 90s Hollywood flair. It was made on a budget of $40 million and brought in well over $200 million at the box office. It is currently available for streaming on HBO Max. Once again, I know that because of the app you recommended, and you saved me from having to pay to watch this one, and I appreciate you.
Yeah, it pays off for itself in the long run, man.
This podcast unofficially sponsored by Real Good.
Yeah, I agree.
They don't pay us, but they do save us money, so it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah, they deserve they deserve it. I'd be down for that, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, what'd you learn about this one?
So what I've learned about this film was they actually did so you know when I always see it with TV shows, and I assume movies do the same, but they do like read-throughs of the episode. So like, you know, they sit around the table and kind of go through.
Table read.
Yeah, table read. They did that with the book for this. They wanted everyone to read it and understand it. So they did a table read of the book. And I think it took them like a long time.
Like a year.
Probably. So, the original Nosferatu influenced some of the visual design and cinematography of this film. I caught one specifically with the shadow that was shown in the back, which we'll get to. But with Bram Stoker's Dracula, Francis Ford Coppola certainly made a visual pleasing movie while sticking close to source material. Even though the film looked unique, it was still influenced by previous vampire movies. That's what I've been saying. This can be seen in several instances throughout the film, especially given the shadow scene that are very prevalent in the 1922 movie. cinematographer Michael Ballhaus explains this fact in his autobiography and credits Nosferatu as inspiring the visual designs and cinematography. So basically what I just said was that it influenced it, and then I said 4 sentences that was also saying it was just influence. I apologize, that was a bad fact. But it was. What can you do? The only CGI used on this film was the blue flames, which I thought was crazy, considering blood shot out of a woman's mouth.
I feel like they had to work a lot harder back in the day.
Yeah, they did. There was actually an animated version of the movie that was created. I think it started out like a storyboard, and then kind of grew from there. It's most of the DVD and Blu-ray releases of this movie contains at least part of the animated version of the film. Which is kind of cool. People like cartoons nowadays. This movie was also released on the 95th anniversary of the original book when it supposedly came out. Not supposedly, when it came out. Which, pretty interesting. Keanu Reeves. The old critics didn't really like his acting in this one.
No.
He got some for the way that his bad accent. But the movie did win 3 Academy Awards.
It's funny to me that they singled out his of all the options, but go on.
Yeah, it actually says here, even though Winona Ryder was really the newest actress out of the 4 leads, critics hated Keanu's the most, which I find odd because I felt like hers was worse, but maybe she got away with it for whatever reason. But yeah, so it won 3 Academy Awards. Personally, I feel like this is because Francis Ford Coppola's name's on there. I'm just saying. Was this award-winning film? Technically, yes. Should it have been? Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, I think that's all the facts I'm going to say for this film.
Nice. Yeah, I do feel like this one was very much like a 90s blockbuster. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like it felt to me very much just in that vein of like a big, like top of the technology and filming and high budget, like early 90s production. And I think that for what it was trying to be at the time, it probably did that pretty well. So I can kind of see why it would have done all right in award season. But that said, I didn't love the movie. But I did appreciate how quickly it moved. Because when I saw it was going to be over 2 hours, I was like, you've got to be kidding me. But most scenes felt quick. Like, I had a hard time pointing out any particular spot where I was just like, man, this is really lulling right here.
Yeah.
And I also feel like they cut a lot out, which I appreciate in a movie where we all generally know the story already. Like, it can move quickly when this is remake number 1000 of a book that everyone's already read, you know?
Yeah, I mean, so one thing that's kind of crazy is that this won 3 Academy Awards when, like, it came out in 92 that had, like, Batman Returns came out that year. Unforgiven, a Western with Clint Eastwood, really good. Reservoir Dogs, American Me, Home Alone 2, like... There's Aladdin, Wayne's World came out. Like, there's a lot of good movies, and this is the one that won. Anyway,
but like westerns and horror movies don't win awards. You know what I mean? Like that. That's true. And something like Wayne's World is not a thing that the Academy is going to be into. Like, I could see this being, superstar, well-renowned director Anthony Hopkins, based on a classic work of literature. High budget special effects. Like, to me, this is pretty much the formula for what was going to win stuff at the time.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's more like, well, did it make a political statement? Mm-hmm. Was it, addressing a topic that we feel is relevant to social progression and things like it? I think things are different now than they were at the time, but I can definitely see, like, in the early 90s, this would have been a thing that would have garnered some accolades at the award shows.
Yeah, I can see that. It was
Don't
also
agree.
the year that my favorite movie of all time came out, Last of the Mohicans. So anyway, no beef there. Yeah, I think it. So here's the way I kind of perceive this movie, and I'll just tell you my overall feelings about it. I felt like this was like this would have been a good. Well, this is like the prequel, right? To all the other vampire movies out there. So this is the one that kind of starts it, and then you can have movies like 30 Days a Night out there. So this one wasn't necessarily scary. I wouldn't say so. I felt like it was more like a fake biography of Dracula that like explains his origins better than in more detail than what Nosferatu did, which I'm not even going to say the second Nosferatu but I felt like that's where it started. Maybe like the explanation for it, kind of where that came from, which is why I kind of allowed it to happen. And I kind of also thought like, well, like if if we consider The Exorcist a horror, then this is technically in the same kind of vein, is the way I kind of saw it.
Yeah, I mean, so this one definitely took more swings at scenes that were like actual meant to be horror scenes. You know what I mean? Like compared to Werner's, where it was just all kind of like dull and flat. Like there were scenes that were meant to be like really intense or violent or like shocking or to create like a sense of dread. But yeah, I mean, like at the end of the day, the goal of this movie was not to scare you. The goal was to unravel this epic tale in, an exciting, adventurous way.
Yeah. And like they threw in like the hot young names of like Winona Ryder, Keanu Reeves, even though this is a rated R film. Granted, it was a 90s R, which is really
soft R.
Yeah. And I felt like this was a very formulated movie. They knew what they were getting themselves in.
Yeah. And even from that opening, so like in this version, Dracula was really a Romanian knight who was married, and his wife killed herself after a false report that he had died in an epic battle. Then he renounced God in his grief and stabbed a cross out of anger and swore to come back to life after death and haunt the living with all powers of darkness. And then he died or something. And then 4 centuries later, Renfield is in an asylum and we're back to the normal story. But it's like they felt like they needed to add that big, like epic, supernatural, mythical intro so that they could have the opening and then the button at the end. And it was just like, okay, why was that necessary exactly? Like what is adding this to the Dracula mythology? Like why are we writing him a new origin story? Like okay but I knew what we were in for at that point, right? Like it's setting it up to ultimately kind of be like a love story. Like he became a vampire because his heart was broken, so you really can't blame him. And okay,
like it was like the cheesiest of like if you don't have a good idea, just say they're doing this out of love, and then it's like changes the whole story. Yeah. Like this is really dark love story.
Yeah,
that's what you run into. I mean, for me, it didn't necessarily bother me too much, and I think it's probably because that last Nosferatu film was still sour in my mouth.
Yeah.
So, like, when this one came out, or when we were watching this one, I was like, okay, well, at least there's better film quality. Like, doesn't feel like it's a Hallmark movie.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. Like,
so, like, I think for me, I had like a pretty good feeling about it, even with understanding, like, okay, this is gonna be a whack story, just from that alone. So it is the proven, tried and true. You get a bad opener when you're playing a show, and it makes you look so much better.
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, this was an easy movie to watch, right? Like it does everything that is in sort of the classic formula of a movie that keeps your attention and moves quickly and is sort of like adventurous and has highs and lows and doesn't really take a lot of risks. So, it was, some things were better than others. Like you had mentioned the shadow stuff. Like I really liked the way that his shadow was moving kind of differently than he was when they first meet. And then there's like the one scene where the shadow is like acting like it's strangling Harker. And that was just kind of a cool way of showing like the growing danger or whatever. And that was a creative way of doing it too, right? Like that was kind of that was a really interesting idea of a way of kind of projecting the undertones of the scene into a way that feels more real. But then there were also some moments like, what was the lizard creature driving the carriage, and why didn't that ever play into anything else the rest of the movie?
I don't know. I wondered if that was part of like the book or something, man.
I couldn't tell you. That was a little weird.
Yeah, it was really strange. I think it was like, I was frustrated with like, obviously with like Winona Ryder and Keanu's like accents, even Anthony Hopkins, because like it went from British, and I was like, oh wait, no, he's trying to do a German accent. But I will say the one that I actually liked was Gary Oldman.
Mm-hmm.
But that man's just like a freaking machine when it comes to like characters.
Oh yeah.
Like I went down the Gary Oldman like rabbit hole, like researching this, just because I was like, man, he is a good actor. Like, in all these other films, it's like, man, like, okay, that makes sense. And like he actually, I was reading where it talked about how he saw like a voice coach to try to get the Dracula voice down. Obviously inspired by Bela Lugosi.
Mm-hmm.
But like, my hat off to Gary Oldman in this.
Yeah.
And honestly, like, I don't feel like Keanu and Winona had such long dialogue. Like, it was almost like when you have like Jet Li comes over to the United States to make a film over here, like his dialogue's real short because, he has trouble, was learning English like the early Jet Li films. I felt like it was almost like the same thing, where it's like, let's keep it to like one line sentences that, or, just a couple words.
You thought Winona Ryder was still learning to read?
Basically. Yeah. And then also I thought
and
to myself,
Keanu Reeves was still learning to talk?
Yeah. My thing though, it was like, hey, like you guys could have easily found good looking British people to do this movie. Well, you could have found British people to do this. You could have
easily found some good-looking Australians, and I say that because I recently checked our metrics, and we have a surprisingly large number of listeners in Australia.
That's what's up.
Yeah.
Yeah, get some Australians. Basically, just redo this in Australia.
No. Yeah, that's what I'm for. More Australia in every movie.
Less, yeah. So, but my thought was like, hey, granted, I don't know. You can't tell me also that there's not those people in LA trying to get, jobs. But it was just like, I was just more so kind of frustrated at like the facts. But then I was like, am I getting old? Like, is this what old people catch? Where it's like, hey, you could have probably saved money.
Yeah.
And still came out with a film that won an Academy Award. But
yeah,
I'm not the one paying the checks around there.
Yeah. I feel like, too, part of it is just like we've watched a lot of movies, right? I feel like the more movies you see, the more you pick up on like how it was made and think about that type of stuff. But
it was also kind of strange how Dracula turned into like werewolves. Which here's the thing though, like this is like what Dracula's based off of. Well, the book, right? The Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's what this is the whole, like, what this spurred. So, granted, if they were really going off the book as well as they say they did, then I guess they did a good job. It was just strange for me to see him as a werewolf. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, and even, like, in the last one, he, like, turned into a bunch of rats sometimes. Like, and vampires can kind of control the weather. Like, there's just a lot of weirdness that's not part of, like, what you really think of first when you think about the mythology around it. But to that point, in my notes, so I mentioned before that I appreciated that it went quick and you could tell that it was edited, because there was some stuff where it was just like, oh, now that's happening, I guess. Mm-hmm. And they didn't really, I'm sure there were like setup scenes that were cut out or whatever. But I had in my notes, once he gets to London, Dracula is sometimes a wolf and sometimes Johnny Depp.
That's who they should have got to play for old Jonathan Harker.
And then the next line in my notes was, daytime Dracula almost rapes Mina, but then they become kind of romantic. So, yeah, things are really progressing. But when he first got to London, I kind of actually liked that scene where, like, it felt like an attempt at real horror. Like, there was the fast-moving camera, kind of like he was, like, flying with the more tense music and kind of the dark and stormy night. And it just... they were definitely selling out to make sure that you felt a sense of danger. And then when Lucy was out walking around the garden and the storm's blowing and the wolf is howling and stuff, like that actually felt like a good horror setup scene, which was nice to see after seeing zero of those in Werner's.
Yeah, I could see that. The thing I think I liked the most, though, was they did the Nosferatu, like, raised from the coffin scene.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That was an obvious, tribute. And I appreciate that. Because that was one thing that we both pointed out with the original film. How we liked how they did that. And it's like, oh, shout out to you guys. It was, this movie was just strange for me. Like, the storyline was weird. Because it was just like, like what you explained with the beginning. And then the middle was like, oh, I found my love. She must have been reincarnated. And then I kept wanting to say Jonathan bailed, he was kidnapped by Dracula, left, and then Winona Ryder's character went to go marry him. But
after almost not, because she was really into Dracula and they were drinking absinthe and she was having flashbacks of his dead wife. So that makes sense.
And so then Dracula gets mad, and that's when he goes and marries, what was her name, Lucy? That's when, I think it was Lucy.
Well, he sucked his blood. He didn't marry her, right?
No, I think he did. I think that's why she was wearing the white dress.
Oh.
I think he went to go, he got, at least that's what I read.
Oh.
I saw the white dress, though, and I figured. Anyway,
I
so
thought he
got busy with her, she turned.
Yeah.
And then,
oh, yeah, he totally, they were...
Yeah.
This movie was weird because it made blood sucking very sexual.
It's not all right. Yeah. How'd they do that?
And yeah, I don't know. It led to what felt like some very awkward scenes to me.
Yeah, it did for sure. But then go back real quick. So then all of a sudden, Winona's like, "Hey, I'm out. I'm actually going back to Dracula." And then Jonathan, like any, I think, guy would do, would be like, well, I'm going to kill him. And then that's the end of the movie.
Yeah.
I mean, but, they obviously kill him.
Yeah.
They don't finish the job, which pissed me off. Yeah, it was just confusing. It was just real choppy. Now, it was easy to watch, though. I had no issues watching. I had no issues focusing on watching it. Some of the movies we do, it's takes everything out of me to not pull my cell phone up and browse.
Oh yeah,
or look for a bike park. Just it takes everything. I didn't have that problem with this one. Granted, I watched it in two different sections, but. Yeah, I didn't really have that problem. And then I was also super confused that Blade wasn't in this.
Yeah, that would have been a huge step in the right direction, right?
Yeah, it was 90s, dude.
Yeah.
Blade's obviously around then. I'm pretty sure he was in the original book. I haven't read it, but I'm pretty sure he was.
Yeah. He was my favorite character. I hate it when they write out my favorite character. Just like Tom Bombadil. Anyway... Another thing I feel like in general is a theme that we've noticed across all these movies. Directors really go over the top with Renfield's character. And I don't quite understand why they feel the need for that. But you remember Renfield in Nosferatu, the vampire? he was just like obnoxiously over the top, and I feel like we got that in this one too. Like it's just, it crosses the point of like you're playing a crazy person to you're distractingly awkward.
Right. Well, here's the thing that really kind of confused me out of it was that was played by Tom Waits, who's like one of those like I don't want to say underground, but just like the musician's musician.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, I say that, and I've listened to some of his stuff, but I wouldn't say I'm a fan, a huge fan or anything. But it's just like he was the one that played it, which I thought was cool that Tom Waits did it, because I was like, oh, I thought he only played in Mystery Men. I was like, oh, he's in another film.
Yeah. I know what I'm watching.
But
tonight.
it was definitely a little overboard. And I don't think I don't feel like he necessarily accomplished that much. It's just like.
Yeah, it didn't add anything, and that's my issue with it is like the director's like, oh, I really want to include this character and make it really memorable, and then it just doesn't play into the overarching story, and you're like, why have I spent so much time watching this awkward overacting?
Yeah, I think that's the thing too with this form of Dracula vampire film is that like he chose who he wanted to turn or not. Like he easily could have just bit. Renfield's character, or R.M. Renfield, and turned it, but he was like, no, I'm just going to kill him by smashing him against the bars. Whereas, like, I feel like a lot of vampire movies now, it's just, that's what they need to do. That's what they're going to do. They're going to, either kill you, like, by biting you to death. I guess maybe that's not true. I don't know. I just feel like it's more about the blood sucking than anything else.
Or, like, building the army, like spreading it.
Yeah.
But yeah, there were a couple of things at the end that I thought the end was real up and down, because there was like that chase scene where Dracula was in a boat and they were in a train, and they're like, we're going to beat him there because we're on a train. And I was like, well, he's on a boat. Why didn't he just sail somewhere else? And then he did. And I was like, thank you, movie. Yeah. Thank you for doing something that is like very rational and not a dumb plot hole. And then when I guess like meanwhile a little bit later, like Mina and Van Helsing are out traveling, and then they've kind of split up, and then like Mina goes to seduce him, and he's just like, okay, this is probably legit, let's do it. His first thought wasn't, this girl a third my age who has been bit by a vampire is now acting weird and trying to seduce me. There's probably something suspect. He's just like, well, I am Anthony Hopkins. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. I just think that he was in trance, but I like your take on it more.
Yeah. But then that scene after that where he draws the circle with the fire and is trying to repel the demon women, and then they like attack the horses, and it's just like super loud and intense, and then the next morning he goes and finds them and like cuts off their heads. Like that sequence I thought was probably the most intense and best in the movie.
Yeah.
And I liked that they included that towards the end, because it really got my attention and like pulled me back in when things had kind of been more just in like chase scene with no vampires mode for a while.
Yeah. Yeah. It definitely, I like that he got that revenge for sure.
Yeah.
I figured he was going to die in the film.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
I just figured,
and
I
have
don't
like
know
a
why.
real dramatic over the top ending. Like, yeah. But.
It's not that we haven't watched 3 versions of this since the past couple of months.
Yeah.
But I just thought he was going to. I did like, and I appreciate like the blood and stuff too. Like that's something that I don't know if they could, they would have got otherwise. So
there was legit danger and like feelings of anticipation and dread, but I think mostly my whole feeling about the movie is tarnished by my thoughts about the ending, because like Dracula quoting Jesus at the end felt a little over the top, and then Mina kills him, and then somehow that releases them both from the curse, and then that was their big finale, was got to tie it back to that ridiculous intro that we made up. And then my very last line in my notes was, I didn't like any of the characters in this movie. I didn't want any of them to live.
Yeah. Just hope that it just like all blew up.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of sad outlook on life, but I'm right there with you.
Yep.
No, I think it had... For me, I actually think I enjoyed this movie, obviously, more than you did. It's definitely not one of my favorites. But I think, yet again, with that last version that we watched, it was so bad that it made this one so much better that I think that's probably the main reason why.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it wasn't... I don't feel like... Some of the things I like with horror movies is, like, I like it to feel like it's fall, you know? You feel like Halloween's coming, and that's the time of the year. And, like, this didn't give me any of those feels or anything, but it still wasn't, a bad movie. I think they tried hard. The reason why I was also saying that, I think I felt like they could have taken it, like, the start of something worse was, like, who else did Dracula turn into a vampire? So, like, he's not in control of those vampires anymore now that he's dead. But then the curse is gone, so then it just kind of got ruined. And so.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was curious, too, like what are some other early 90s horror movies? Because I couldn't really think of very many. And so, in looking into it, I found, like, Tremors was one. There was... I think a Hellraiser remake, maybe.
I think Misery came out in 90 or late 80s or early 90s.
Yeah, and Silence of the Lambs was in the ballpark.
People Under the Stairs.
So yeah, I mean, there were a few, but it seems like a lot of them were kind of these maybe bigger budget. The ones that were bigger budget were a lot less like horror. Interview with the Vampire was one in the 90s.
Stephen King's It. I feel like that one.
Yeah. So, but I feel like the real like horror movies were not ones that came out like around that time.
Yeah,
and so this, in my mind, this one is very much more of like this is not a sold out horror movie. This is more of like an epic kind of adventure movie that uses some elements of horror.
Yeah. No, I think so. I think that's you nailed it with that. The one good thing about this timing though is that this was like right before all the teen horror movies came out.
Yeah, that's true.
So this was like the period right before we got a lot of shit. Yeah. That I grew up watching. That I love. Still shit. Yeah. Love it though.
Yep. All right then. I have not even looked ahead. What are we doing next time? Do you remember? Mute Witness.
Mute Witness.
Never heard of her.
Mute Witness came out in 1995. It's a Russian, British, German horror film. It was shot in Russia.
I'm going to have to read, aren't I?
Well, let's check real quick and make sure that we can find it.
Oh, now we're talking.
This should be our closing segment on every podcast.
Do you find yourself scrolling endlessly through the internet trying to find the movie that you want to watch? With so many streaming platforms, it can be hard to keep track of where things are available.
Uh-oh. So we're going to have to cut this section.
Oh, yeah? Can't watch it?
Not available on any services.
Sweet. Okay. So then that's kind of exciting, though, because it means we get to pick another 90s horror movie. No, it means you get to pick another. That's what we do. Bastard.
That's what we do, though, when we can't...
You knew this was coming.
I didn't, actually.
You knew I wasn't going to like this movie, and to punish me, you're making me pick the next one.
No, you've done good. Wait,
well, but that now it's more pressure, though, is what I'm saying. Is like last time it was Spider Baby. I'm not going to top that.
Oh, I thought you picked out another. Yeah, you did. Suspiria.
Oh, I did Suspiria.
Yeah, you got two, right. Dude.
Yeah, okay.
You can do this.
Line them up, knock them down. I don't care.
Yeah. Just pick one where they all die, and we'll be fine.
This week's segment of Line 'em Up, Knock 'em Down brought to you by Real Good. All right, we'll be back and try again next time.
Shout out to all you people in Australia.
Thanks, Mike.
And that's it for today's episode. If you've listened this far, then thank you, and we hope you've enjoyed it. We're always looking for new ideas, so if you have any questions, comments, or movie suggestions, please send us an email at thehorrificpod@gmail.com, or feel free to comment on or message our Facebook page. Just search for The Horrific Podcast. Thanks for listening.